Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for the green on the mountains. Thank you for the air conditioning in the building. Father, I thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross for us and to place us in this city to worship you. And Jesus, as we come here tonight in this building to contemplate you and to wrestle with you, we confess that we're all in different places. We're in places of excitement. We're in places of frustration. We're in places of just tiredness from the week. Some of us are just trying to hold on to our sanity, onto our health. But we're here, God, and so we ask that you would honor that you would speak to our hearts, that you would give us courage to believe what's true, that you would give us a renewed sense of you. And Holy Spirit, we ask that you would continue the work in us to be transformed into your likeness, but also in the places that we are weak and are unable. We ask that you would come on us to be transformed, to do the things we can't do, to speak the truth that we need to speak. We ask that all in your holy name, Jesus. Amen. So we are in this series on relationships. So we're talking about relationships, and we're talking about relationships kind of in three categories. Number one, yes, we're talking about relationships in marriage. We're talking about relationships in the context of all of us, how we relate as we operate as a community. We're talking about relationships in just the sense of having friends and what it means to be in friendships. And so we're kind of talking about some of the principles that apply to all of those areas. And yeah, we are focusing a little bit on marriage, but we're kind of looking at all those things. And we're looking at them, what we've basically said so far is that all of us are created in God's image, and we have this need. It's a need that can't be met by ourselves. They're needs that can't be met by anyone else because anyone else disappoints us. The reality that we all kind of hit when we begin to grow up is that everybody is disappointing, including us, when it comes to these needs, and that there are two of them. One is that we all need to be loved, and the other is that we all need some sense of purpose or impact, right? But it's not just that we all need to be loved. We all need to be loved in a way that's secure, a way that where we know that if we just do something wrong, we're not going to not be loved anymore. Like we need this love that's anchored to something, right? That's not going anywhere. And we need to know that our life has meaning or purpose, like that we can impact people. So it needs to be significant, something that's like we can have an effect on this world. So we need to be loved, and we need to know that we can have impact, right? But what we find out, like I said, is that none of those needs can be met in other people, but it can be met in Jesus, right? Jesus tells us in 1 John 3:16 that the way we know what love is that Christ died for us, and that we should also then, in turn, love others in the same way. So when we ask the question, am I loved? The announcement that Jesus gives us, the God of the universe gives us, is yes, you're loved. I died for you. When you ask the question, does my life have any meaning? Jesus says, yes, it has so much meaning that I died for you. Right? We call this the outpouring of Jesus. The cross is, if to use a theological term, is the kenosis. It's the pouring out of God. Right? And so what the cross says to us is, yes, I poured myself out for you. But the problem is that as you and I enter into relationships, so marriage, into this community, and in friendships, we inevitably find out that if we're going to be that person who's going to offer that to the world, that we're going to say to our spouse and to our friends and to our community, yes, you're loved and you have meaning, that the people around us are going to be disappointing. Right? They're not always going to say, oh, and you're loved and you are important too. Right? And so much so that, like, for me, there's this picture in the New Testament with Peter and the disciples It takes place in Matthew 14. The disciples are out on the water in a storm, and Jesus isn't with them. And I want to pick up the story in verse 25 of Matthew 14. It says this: shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them. So they're out in the water in the storm, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." And Peter says, "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come out on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I love this picture because for me, a lot of times, this is how marriage and living out life in this church and living and having friends really is like. I say, yeah, I want to step into my relationship with my wife, and I'm going to believe that Jesus loves me, and I'm going to offer her that same love and grace. I'm going to be his instrument. And so all of a sudden, what I find is I see Jesus, but there's this huge storm around me. Right? There's a storm of our parenting of my two children. There's this storm of like things we didn't communicate well this morning. There's the storm of sometimes when I offer all of this stuff to my wife or my friends, or sometimes when I walk in the door here, I just feel lonely. Like there's all those kind of chaos going around me while I'm trying to balance, right? Because we talked about this balance beam of truth, or the storm, and there's Jesus. And so I begin to sink. You begin to sink, right? And we begin to desperately flail around. Now, Peter gives us an example. As we're flailing around in our relationships, the example Peter gives us is to cry out, "Lord, save me," right? That's the thing that you need to cry out. Now, there's a lot going on in this passage. We're not going to look at it. I just want you to have that picture, that to understand that, like, marriage, your church life, friendships, there are good things in them. But as you begin to minister, as you begin to offer God's love and God's proclamation of others' purpose, you end up being disappointed and lonely and wrestling with those things. It's not all peachy keen. And so last week, Rod talked about what we tend to do, right? He said to offer love, to offer impact, to say, hey, you have impact to our friends and community and wives and husbands. That's called ministry, right? But what a lot of us tend to do is we tend to manipulate, right? We tend to think, okay, I am not actually getting what I want in life. And what I want in life is to feel loved and to know that I'm appreciated. So how do I go about getting that? So I use different ways of saying things. I pout when I want to get something. I repeatedly say the same thing over and over again. I come at it at different ways, right, to get what I want. And if it's not working, if my wife or my friends or my church don't say, hey, you're appreciated, then maybe I'll try to get some negative impact. That'll work. I'll say bad things. I'll be a certain way in order to get some impact. So at least I have impact. It may not be good, but I have it, right? We begin to manipulate our situations to try to fix that feeling of need for love and need for impact, right? So, a couple weeks ago then, what I said was, if you kind of want a diagnostic for your marriage, you could kind of look at Matthew chapter 22, when Jesus is asked what the greatest commandment is. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest command. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And I said, one way of thinking about your relationships and your marriage and your friendships are they centered on loving God? And are they centered on loving others? If that's where it's centered, then you have a good relationship. And that's kind of the way you have to orient yourself towards each other. But the problem with that is this talk all about being a minister and expressing how you care for somebody and saying, here's where God feels about you, is that what it sounds like a lot of times is that you have to shove your feelings down. Like that there's this problem that when you get into relationship, when you come here into the community and you find out that, hey, you're not appreciated and loved like you thought you were, well, that's disappointing. And you have feelings, right? We all have feelings. In fact, you don't have a problem with your good feelings. Like I went and played some board games today or this week with some friends, and I had good feelings, even though I lost. Right? I didn't win any games. But I had good feelings, and I didn't have any existential angst about it. I didn't ask, like, what am I supposed to do with these good feelings? I don't know. This is difficult. No, the thing that most of us have problem with is that we're frustrated and angry and feel aggressive. Like that's the problem, is we get into these relationships at church where people have disappointed us and hurt us and haven't come through the way we want, and we're hurt and angry. And we kind of feel aggressive about people, like we want to tell them. Right? Or we're in our relationships in our marriage and we're not communicating and we're just like, no, you got to hear me, right? Anger. What am I supposed to do with my anger? What am I supposed to do with my feelings? Right? What am I supposed to do with these feelings? If I'm supposed to be this loving, caring instrument of God in other people's lives, right? That sounds like I can't do anything with my feelings. And if I'm not allowed to manipulate anybody, if you're telling me I can't manipulate, what am I supposed to do with my feelings? Well, let me tell you that the first thing is you don't shove your feelings down. Like, you don't swallow them. Feelings are okay. It's actually okay to be angry. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to actually feel things. In the Old Testament, there's an old prophet named Ezekiel. And in Ezekiel chapter 24, starting in verse 15, God tells Ezekiel a horrible thing. He says, I'm going to take your wife, the wife that you love, and I don't want you to do any of the traditional mourning. All I want you to do is groan inwardly. Now there's a reason that he's asking him to do this, and a reason that he's saying, here's how you react. But what he doesn't say, and I think it's really key, is that he doesn't say, shove your feelings down. Don't feel anything. What he says is that you need to groan inwardly. Now, I'm telling you that story just so that you know that God is saying it's okay to feel. Over and over again, there are stories about feeling, about humans feeling. Even Jesus weeps. And in that passage where it says Jesus wept, it's actually, the word in the Greek is to tremble with so much sorrow. Like he was just trembling. There's this feeling. It's okay to feel, right? A lot of times when we think, it's not all right for me to be angry, it's okay for you to have that emotion well up in you and for you to be angry. But here's what happens most of the time with our anger. James, in James chapter 4, says this. He says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. So, what James is saying is the reason that you're in these fights and in these quarrels is that internally there's something wrong with your desires. There's a battle with your desires. Your anger has gotten out of control, right? So what I want to offer you tonight is two things. One is a way to deal with your anger and your feelings, your feelings of anger and frustration and aggressiveness, right? That sense of thing. And how then you might, in your relationship at your church, in your family, and in your friendships, actually talk about your feelings in ways that are actually helpful and advance things. So let's first talk about anger in the context of James. But I need to just offer you two things. There are two popular passages that you'll often hear, and people say that you're not supposed to let the sun go down on your anger, and that you should not sin in your anger. Okay? So the one that says shouldn't let the sun go down on your anger, that one is about bitterness. You are not to nurture bitterness. The other one, when you're angry, you shouldn't sin, is about justice. And what it means is, when Russ over here is beating up Jeff, right, and I get angry, I'm like, Russ, what are you doing? And then I go and I beat Russ up. That's sinning in my anger, right? You are not to do the thing that you are angry about. So that's what he's talking about. But here, the emotion is saying that inside we have these desires and what we want, and we're frustrated by these desires, so we're getting angry and fighting. And this happens a lot in our relationships. So I want to talk about this idea that if you've been at the Village for a while, you've heard us talk about this. If you haven't, this is going to be new. But when we think about anger, we're going to talk about this thing called goals versus desires. Okay? And so I'm going to tell you that when you get angry, when you feel that anger, a lot of times it means that you've taken what you desire and made it into a goal. So I'm going to explain this to you. A desire is something that requires more than you. Okay? A goal is something that you can accomplish. So let me give you an example. Now, I know there's a lot of marathon runners here, so I'm using an example of marathon runners. This has nothing to do with you, okay? This is not about your relationship. It's an easy example, okay? So, if I decide that I want to run a marathon, right? So I'm going to train for this marathon. So my goal then, I'm going to make this goal that I'm going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, every morning, and I'm going to run 10 miles. Now, that's a good goal because I'm in control of it. Now, you may argue, yeah, well, if the electricity goes out and your alarm doesn't go off and your knee, okay, yes, I understand that we could get nitpicky. But it's a good goal. You can set your alarm. You can choose to get up. You can choose to go run 10 miles, right? You can do this on your own. That's a good goal. Now, a bad goal or a desire that you make into a goal would be, okay, I want to get up at 4 o'clock and run 10 miles, and I want my wife to get up at 4 o'clock with me and run 10 miles too. Okay? Now, if I make it a goal, then I'm going to say, hey, honey, I want you to run 10 miles with me at 4 o'clock in the morning. And she's going to say, no. And so I'm going to say, well, she might say yes, and then your goal works out fine for a while. But so I'm going to manipulate her. I'm going to keep saying, well, come on, if you do this, then I'll do it. You never do anything that I want. She's like, fine, I'll go run with you if you want. So then the alarm goes off, and you say, hey, honey, we're going running. And she's like, not today. I'll do it tomorrow. So all of a sudden, you're out there at 4 in the morning going, my wife never does anything with me. She's always like, and you're running angry, right? Which then means you get an injury. And it's all bad for you. But do you see, it's a very simple example, but do you understand what happens here? Is that we do this all the time. We take things that require more than us to cooperate, and we make them a goal. And that's why we're angry. A lot of times in our relationships is what we've said is, honey, you're going to do this for me. If you don't do this, then I'm going to feel this way. Now, here's the reason this all happened. Think about this. This is what I love about this. Just gets me all excited. If I go to my wife and say, hun, it's really important for me that you come run with me. Okay, now I make myself vulnerable, and she can reject me. And she can say, no, I really don't want to run with you. Now, if it's just a desire, it's a good desire, it's not a goal, then I'm going to be disappointed. But if I've made it a goal, I'm going to be angry. Now, here's the cool thing about disappointment and anger, is that anger is about power. If you think about the cross, the people in power were the people who crucified Jesus, the rulers, the Romans. So when you and I get angry, the person that we're siding with is a place of power. We've made a goal that someone else will cooperate with us and they won't, and so we're angry. When we're disappointed, when we're actually offer our desires and risk being rejected, we place ourselves with Jesus in a place of suffering. We're disappointed. And actually in this world, disappointment equals often loneliness, right? What it accents is that you and I don't feel fully loved. And you and I feel like we don't have impact. And so there we are feeling vulnerable. Right? This is the reason why we like to take our desires and make them goals, because none of us want to feel vulnerable. Right? I had this crazy dream. I went to Bookman's and I had a lot of electronic equipment. I don't know where I got it. I think I must have stolen it from the village. But I was trying to trade it in. It was like $1,500 worth of equipment at Bookman's. And they wanted to give me $25. And I was livid. And not only that, after I'd argued with them, like they came back and said, oh, and you're going to have to pay this recycling fee. And I was like, you're going to give me $25 and then I have to pay a recycling fee? I don't understand this. And I woke up so angry. And it highlighted something about me. You see, one of the goals that I have in life is that no one will take advantage of me. So even in my dreams, I get angry when that doesn't work out. I'm like, no, you can't take advantage of me. It's a good desire. All of us should desire not to be taken advantage of. You're not in control of that at all. So as we get angry, or when we feel that emotion of anger, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what's actually my goal here? What are the things that I'm actually longing for? Now, here's just kind of a little way you can deal with your anger as you think about it. So when you feel the emotion of anger, the first thing you need to do is just say, okay, I'm going to be slow to anger. I'm not going to fuel this emotion. Number two, I'm going to acknowledge it. Right? I'm going to acknowledge that I'm angry. You don't have to go tell anybody you're angry, but you need to acknowledge it to God. And I said this a few weeks ago. If you need to go take a walk so you can talk out loud, go talk out loud to God in a walk. If you need to get in your closet and tell God you're angry, you have to acknowledge that you have emotion. Right? It's okay to acknowledge that you're angry and that things aren't the way you really long for them to be. Things are not working out. Right? But then you have to say, okay, I need to readjust. What is a good goal? Right? What's a good goal? Not, where have I kind of mixed things up here? And then, once you kind of clarified that and repented in the places you need to repent, you can decide, okay, do I need to take these feelings and tell someone, or do I need to hold on to them? Now, normally the way we deal with expressing our feelings of anger is that we just either stick them down somewhere inside our stomach and get an ulcer, or we decide that we should just dump them out on somebody and they should deal with them. But really, once you kind of understand where the anger is coming from, you begin to just ask, okay, how might I express these emotions to the person I'm angry with or the situation that I'm angry in order to actually move people towards Jesus? How do I do that? So that's and now we could spend a lot of time talking about goals versus desires, but I have a limited amount of time, and we want to hear from Mark and Lane. So I'm going to just leave that there. Now, as you and I have emotions, we have emotions of hurt and loneliness and anger and frustration. As we're dealing with these, the best way to kind of move all of us towards God is that we have to learn to talk about our feelings. But the problem that I find when I talk to anybody, when they talk about our church, when we talk about our relationships with one another, when we talk about marriage, is that when we start talking about these unique things that are called feelings that pretty much define who we are, even though they don't, but they really do, but they don't, right? And it's like a minefield. None of us know how to talk to each other, right? We don't know how to communicate. We stick our foot in our mouth all the time. And so what we need to do is learn as a community to accept where people are in their expression of their emotions, right? In Romans chapter 15, verse 7, Paul says this, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. And then if you read the rest of that passage in Romans, it tells you the effect of accepting, right? Of what happens to the community of God when we accept one another, right? Instead of rejecting one another. In order to accept somebody, you really have to be able to hear how they feel. So what I want to offer to you guys is just some ways that you can accept people and some obvious ways that you reject people. Because in a lot of times in counseling, I go through these first. We kind of think through these first because they stir people's emotions up. So let's just think about it this way. All right, we're going to first talk about 6 ways that we tend to hear somebody's feelings and reject them. And we all do this, okay? So a lot of times in my relationship with my wife, one of the things that she reflects back to me, and it's often kind of a reminder, is, hey, Eric, you've been kind of harsh with Elliot, okay? Because sometimes I am harsh with Elliot. Or you haven't been present with me. Like, she reflects that to me, like you're not here. Now, the first thing I could do is defend or explain, and this is one that I tend to do a lot of times, which is, well, the reason that I was hard on Elliot is because he just won't unload the dishwasher, right? Shuts everything down. Or I like the apology one. Oh, hon, I know I'm sorry. I'm always hard on Elliot. I'll try to do better, right? So both of those shut the conversation down. We think like an apology is good, but no, it's not. It's just shutting it down. I'll do better, hon. I'll get it together. I'm sorry. Don't talk to me about it anymore. I don't want to think about it. I'll try better next time. Or we like the attack, right? A lot of us like that in the sense of, if my wife says, hey, like, we were talking, yesterday and you didn't seem to be present. You weren't like listening to me. And I'm like, well, what do you expect? I'm always here. It's not like I'm at a bar drinking. Like, I'm here right now listening to you. Like, I do listen. I listen to you, right? So to push back, like, and say, no, that's an unjust way. You're being unjust. Like, you don't really understand. Your experience is not good. Again, Eric, you're kind of being harsh with your son. You like to advise. This is one that I really like, which is, well, I wouldn't need to be so hard on Elliot if you would be more consistent in your discipline. So you need to get it going here. Work on this a little bit, right? So we either defend, we apologize, we attack, we advise, or we have some disdain, which is like, I don't think that that's how it was. That's not how I experienced it. I don't think Elliot experienced me as harsh. I think you're out of touch. Like, I don't think you really know what happened there. You got your issues mixed up in that, right? This little, like, contempt, disdain. Or there's the sense of us just correcting. I think you really were connecting with me, hon. Like, you were smiling. When you smile, you seem to be present. So yeah, I think like maybe you should rethink. Because I was really listening. Do you remember I said those things? Like I told you what you were feeling, so you should be okay, right? We correct, right? So think about these. We either defend, we apologize, we attack, we advise, we offer sort of contempt or disdain, or we correct. And all of those shut down feelings, and all of those push us away from each other and also fuel the anger. But there are 3 ways that you and I can kind of use to accept things, and they're very powerful to be able to hear someone's feelings. So the first one is simply to reflect. And my goal at the Village has always been to just really get sick of this phrase. And that phrase is, it sounds like. If I can get every villager to say, it sounds like, I will have done my job as pastor, I feel. Being able to reflect somebody's experience without telling them. So when my wife says, Eric, like you are being harsh on Elliot, if I say, Sue, it really sounds like I'm not paying attention to the way I'm talking to Elliot. All of a sudden she's like, yeah, remember when you said this? I think he really took that hard. Oh. When we reflect back what people are experiencing, it transforms conversation. Because it says, you have impact, you have meaning. What you experience is actually valid. Simply to say, it sounds like you're lonely. Sounds like I don't always hear you very well, right? Sounds like it's just a great phrase. Clarifying. So if you reflect, the second thing you can do is to clarify. If my wife is to say to me, hey, Eric, like yesterday when we were talking, you just didn't seem present. As a man, I hear that present, and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does present mean? It's like all women know what present means, but I don't know what present means. Women don't know what present means either. So clarifying is simply to say, hey, hon, what do you mean by present? Like, what does that mean to you? It's real simple. Instead of saying, what do you mean I'm not present? I'm here. That's what present means. You sit right here, right? It's just being able to get more of a definition. Clarifying. Reflect, clarify. And the last one is really just to explore things. And I think, like, if my wife says, hey, Eric, like, you were, a good one is, like, you haven't really connected with your daughter. Like, she seems to be, you two don't seem to be connected. Instead of kind of being defensive, I can explore that a little bit more. So I can say, okay, so what you're saying then is that I'm not spending enough time with her? Is that what you mean? Or I can say, or do you feel like I'm not actually listening to where she's at? So I can ask questions that kind of allow my wife to fill it out for me. Now that can be about her. She could just say, I'm feeling really lonely. And I can say, well, does that mean you don't feel like you're connecting with your friends? No, this is about you, Eric. Oh, okay. All right. So now I can, then I can explore that a little bit more. So reflecting, clarifying, and exploring, right? These are, again, I'll say it. If I can get you all to do this, then I will put my gold star on my little pastor thing. Like, Eric has accomplished what he wants. Because I think it's powerful to be able to sit in that place of vulnerability and allow someone else to just express their feelings. Okay? Now, I just dumped a bunch of stuff on you. Mark and Lane are going to come up here, and what they're going to do is they're going to answer 3 questions. One, they're just going to quick tell you how they fell in love and got married. A lot of you got to watch that, so you can say, no, that's not how it happened. You can interrupt them. The second thing is that they're going to talk about a little bit about some of the demands that they had coming into marriage. Sort of things that they were like, no, this is what has to happen, their goals. And then they're going to let us in on a little bit of a conversation, how some of that's kind of played out in their marriage. So, and I think Saoirse is going to also add in her part.
She likes to sleep on us alone. It's convenient. You wanted to say how we met? I'm going to back up. The pre-stages?
So, when Lane was a freshman at the U of A, she was involved in the Navigators, and so was my brother. And I was a junior in high school, and my brother brought a group of Navigators down, I think on a Sunday, and we went out for tacos. They came to church with us, and we went out for tacos. And Lane was in that group. And then we kind of saw each other off and on over the next few years. And so when I started coming to the village, I kind of knew Eric, and I kind of knew Daniel, and a few other people, I feel like. But the only person I really felt like I had talked to and connected with before coming to the village was Lane. And so I spent a lot of time talking to Lane. And then you can continue the story.
Like, and this is where you all heard that Mark spent a lot of time talking to me, and I was angry. Yeah, we talked a lot. And then he started coaching the soccer team with Jeremiah Dean. And so we ended up around each other all the time. Yeah, it took a while. Mm-hmm.
Took a while.
And I often pray that Jesus would hit him over the head with a 2x4 to see me. That was my prayer. Mm-hmm.
I was blind.
And we started playing cards and talking about Doctor Who. And then the magic happened. And we invited David Tennant to our wedding, and he didn't come. So that's how we met. The next part, demands coming into marriage. Oh, there were lots. No, your part was good first.
So one of the demands that I had coming in was I kind of thought that our marriage would be like playing cards and watching Doctor Who. You think he's joking, but it's really that's. So I kind of thought like, okay, like I'm a musician and Lane plays music at church and she's a musician, and so we'll play music together a lot and we'll play games together, and this will be a lot of fun. And so that was one of the things that I coming in, I really thought a lot about. And when that didn't happen exactly how I thought it would, I started shutting down a lot of those desires. So like, oh, can we do this? No. Okay. Well, I just won't offer that. Next time I'll offer something different and see what she'll do with me. And it wasn't that she didn't want to do things. It wasn't that she didn't want to like play music with me. But I wanted it to just sort of happen. Like we're home on a Friday night. Hey, let's play guitar. Let's get the guitars out and play music. And that's not how Lane processes the world and her evenings and the things that she wants to do. And so I felt sort of rejected, and I got sort of angry and resentful that like these things weren't happening, that the things that I wanted to do weren't happening.
Yeah, this past week at work, we took the StrengthsFinder test, for those of you who have taken it. The StrengthsFinder test, if you've ever taken it. And Mark and I have been laughing about how utterly different we are, like utterly opposite. And I think in the beginning we thought, like going into marriage, we were like, we're the same. We have fun. We like the same music. We both understand like the Midwesternness. And I was like teaching at Desert View. So I was like, Mark had grown up in Mexico and a lot of my students were Mexican. So we like had a heart for the same people, but we don't work or think the same. So when we started living together, it was like really hard. I think, especially in the ways where like if I am the stereotypical type A person and Mark is the stereotypical type B person. So there were a lot of conversations that had to be had with lots of you of me making lots of goals for Mark, which doesn't work. Because as being a teacher, I was like, my job is to get all you people to do what I want all the time. And I kind of put that on Mark very often. But I think it stemmed out of a longing to be taken care of. I feel like coming in to marriage, you do come with good desires, like to be taken care of, to be seen, to be known. And my dad was a very practical person, so I kind of put that onto Mark, expecting, and a lot of you helping reflect that I expected Mark to kind of take care of me in that way. And it's not that he doesn't take care of me in that way. But Mark, I feel like his giftings in the creative, in the emotional taking care of me, that some of the like practical, like things aren't exactly like the first thought that's going to come to him. So yeah, like seeing things around the house, that's like the stupidest things, like the simplest things are probably the hardest parts of not the hardest parts of our marriage, but the everyday nitty gritty things that give us the most, like where I end up feeling alone. I would say I tend to the side of, I think we both get into the bitterness and we both get into the justice, but I can end up feeling alone. Like I'm the only one who sees this and I'm the only one who is going to notice these things. And I can kind of like camp out and instead of asking Mark or offering like, hey, can you help me with this? Or, hey, could you do this today? I just like can quietly resent over there and then start doing all the things myself and running the list in my head of like being angry that how come he didn't do it? How come he didn't fold the laundry? He was just sitting there. He was playing a game, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So I think one of the ways that, one of the specific things that we encountered for me, in terms of my demands, was the music thing. I really wanted to just be able to get out instruments and play music, and it didn't work, and it was hard and painful. And I think one of the ways that Jesus really entered in was actually by allowing it to not work, allowing it to completely break down, and bringing people alongside me to help me to see Lane, and help me to figure out, okay, so this is a desire that I have, but how do I come alongside Lane and allow her to join me in my desire, and express it to her, and have it not be something that I demand of her, but something that she can actually join with me. And that really took the form of like really planning out and saying, okay, instead of wanting it to be like really spontaneous and all of a sudden whatever, like having it say like Thursday night we're gonna play music and we're gonna play like these Village songs, and we're gonna play together, and figuring out how it would work.
Yeah, I think a lot of the goals that we make for each other are out of really good longings, but then, you and I kind of butt heads about being, like, not wanting to be disappointed. That's especially me, and so we get really angry, and we quietly get resentful. We don't tend to be explosive with each other, but yeah, so it's been a good journey of, like, you baby stepping me and me not like getting pissy, basically. Can I say that? Sorry if I can't. Getting angry.
I'll let you guys keep talking, but
we're rambly. We're new parents. I'm sorry.
Give them a hand. Thank you, guys.